They kept rising the ladder because they learned from each of those experiences how to be better, how to grow. That's education. Recently, I was thinking about education, okay? And education is something that's important to everybody. Nobody disagrees. The more educated we become, the better our options, the better our opportunities, and the more life seems to present new things in a positive direction. Poverty and education tend to be very linear. There seems to be a literal approach. When you want to escape poverty, you have to get educated, and then you have to continue to get educated. And here's where this mindset came from. When I was in college, I remember thinking, okay, if I get a degree, this is going to give me options. My mom and dad said, options are great, and you need to have an education. We don't have a college education. As successful as they had become, they still had a different approach, right? And so I knew getting my education. So I was graduating early from college, and I was like, well, I really don't know what I want to be when I grow up, so I'm going to go to law school. And so I started just assuming that that was adding more education. You know, again, linear. We're going to go in a straight line, and we're going to add more education because it makes me smarter. It'll give me more options. Here's the reality looking back all those years later. A, surprise, didn't go to law school. And B, all of life's side roads and dirt roads and off tracks and swimming and drowning, all of that is the track to success. It's the zigzags in between the direction that you think you're supposed to be going in that really make up the value, the gold in between. And I think that the logic and the mindset that education, so let's define education. Education is learning, right? It's learning. It doesn't mean it has to be only one direction. I have so many great friends that are in restaurants, that own HVAC and electrical companies, plumbing companies, highly successful individuals that did not go in the linear direction of college. They came out and started earning money immediately. They came out and started working for someone else. They had horrible bosses. They had people that wouldn't show up to work. They kept rising the ladder because they learned from each of those experiences how to be better, how to grow. That's education. I think what's super cool is having been blessed enough to have a college education and a directional pull of where I needed to be. I also can see today through entrepreneurism, through owning a business, through developing strengths that I'm great at and not focusing on things I'm not, that there's a lot of different paths to education. That the best path of education is where passion meets your result. So if I have passion at something and I can attribute my passion to something that I love and I'm doing and I'm dedicated to, I don't want to stop. I want to keep doing it. I want to keep working at it. That is where education excels. I remember picking up the first book on criminal justice, and having a love for learning about psychology and the way the mind thinks and why bad people do bad things. It always intrigued me when I got to college, and it was the first time I was picking up books and reading about something that I couldn't put the book down. And I remember thinking to myself, gosh, if I only got to read and do more of the things I love, how much better would life be? How much easier would education be? How many people go into something because they think it's going to pay them really good? I'm going to be a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse. I'm going to be whatever because it's going to pay me good. I mean, that's a really poor decision to make based on the pay. You can be paid great at anything if you're great at it. If you're great at it and you are the best at it, you can be paid for it, right? I mean, that's the logic there is something that even as parents, isn't it funny as parents, because a lot of parents watch these, I know. As a parent, isn't it funny how you have to retell yourself stuff that you remember, that you have to remind yourself that you remember this as an important part of your core values, because your kids start to grow up and maybe they're not perfect at everything you were perfect at. Maybe they're not math and science driven. Maybe they're more business and English. Maybe they're more of a public speaker. Maybe they're really great at art. But you have to remind yourself that education doesn't have to be linear either, right? Them finding what they love and doing it and being great at it could mean if they're an artist and they become the greatest artist, they can make a lot more money than they ever could have been as a doctor. But maybe their art takes them into being a surgeon and they become someone that saves millions of lives. I have no idea. But the key component is they can't become anything if we stifle them and help them think that education is only one way. So if you're not going through the motions and you don't teach our children that, guess what? You do have to play the game. You do have to get good grades. You do have to get out of school. You do have to give yourself options. But also know that the learning lessons can be the in-betweens. You know, I learned a lot of cool stuff from the teachers of the classes that maybe weren't the most important of high school. I took PE every year I could, but the head wrestling coach was our PE coach, and he was pretty great. And there were a lot of really great leaders that I learned from in those classes. I also love extracurricular activities for kids. I love the fact that when you grow up, all the teams I was a part of, all the failures I had in sports, all the successes I had, all the feelings of success and failure helped define us as humans, helps define us in the workforce, helps build lessons that are part of education. See, my boys playing soccer every Sunday and having practices every night and being tired when they do their homework because they have a very busy schedule is all part of time management. It's all part of learning how to work when things get a little tough. And prioritizing, if you love something, you prioritize it. It also teaches us lots of other lessons, like life isn't fair, and it's a challenge, and anything worth getting is worth working for. You know, these are all simple things that all go to defining education. And I just wish I knew this stuff when I was 21. I wish when I was forcing myself to graduate early from college because I couldn't fathom not making money and paying for this stuff, or I was challenged with going to law school and not knowing what I was going to be when I grew up, and just knowing that's okay. Just knowing it's okay to not know what you want to be when you grow up. I love what I do today. 25 years from now, I hope I'm doing cool stuff still that I love. And that's about the definitive nature of my brain, you know, and that's okay. And I think that helps me be a little bit more open-minded with my boys. Don't worry, I still get frustrated and disappointed when they're not bringing home good grades. And I still pressure them to do things that sometimes I have to remind myself that I struggled with as well. We all do that stuff. But as we approach education, I think defining it with a wider scope, with a peripheral versus just what's right in front of us, can do all of us wonders. I'd love to hear your interpretation of education. I would love to hear something you wish you could tell yourself when you were 21 that you know now about your own path. If you could go back, what are some of the things that you would redefine from an educational standpoint? Are there jobs that you would still have and take? I washed dishes. I hated it. I learned really early I never wanted to do that ever again. I don't even want to do it in the house, although I do occasionally. But the reality is, I learned what I didn't want to do, which helped define what I did want to do. What are the things that you did that were like that? What were the worst jobs you had? Share with us some of these thoughts and some of this mindset shift that you've had over the course of the last 5 years, 10 years. Are you 21 and you're watching this and you're figuring out what are you going to be when you grow up? And you're realizing that it's okay. We don't all know. Most people don't know. But if you do good things and you treat people well, and you put yourself in a good position to learn in everything you're going into, and you look at your failures as learning lessons, usually you end up in the right place. I feel pretty blessed to continue to be in the right place. I hope you do too, and I'd love to learn from you. So help us continue to move forward, and join us with some comments below.